Hello, and what a wonderful day it is out for philosophy on the field today. Let's take a look at what we have on our plate. We have the two teams, and what a lineup. On the pro-doping side, we have MVP Brent Kios, who's really been shown to carry the team here. He's followed by Faust and Maya, as well as some others on the sideline. And on the anti-doping team, we have Murray and Pound. Pound brings some valuable experience to this side from his big role as director of the World Anti-Doping Association.
The players all look great, Phoebe. The debate today is on doping, and is doping a moral transgression, or is it morally permissible and should be legalized for use in professional sports? Now, let's set some ground rules for the game. The operational definition of doping is the use of pharmaceuticals and other biomedical techniques to enhance athletic performance. The anti-doping side claims doping involves a serious moral transgression, while the pro-doping side claims they are not conclusive in giving reasons doping is wrong.
Some arguments we might see here that they've tackled in the past include safety, coercive effects, dignity, unfairness, that it's contrary to the purpose of sport, and that it's harmful to the interests of children. Something I'm sure we'll see from the crowd favorite Kios is the idea that we shouldn't leap to the conclusion that doping is morally wrong if we can't say why it's different than practices we already accept as morally permissible. We know he's also going to keep it moral and avoid arguments to prohibit doping for non-moral reasons like economic, etc.
And they're kicking it off now with the coin toss, the fairest of all starters. And looks like anti-doping gets it with tails. Straight into the field with the argument of safety. They claim doping is unsafe because most of the substances used by athletes to enhance performance carry significant health risks, including risk of death. Now, Phoebe, if you look at the stats, this definitely has some truth to it. A significant number of professional cyclists and elite runners have died at a young age of heart attack and stroke, presumably due to stimulant use and EPO. Some other steroids have been associated with the increased risk of cardiovascular, hepatic, and endocrine disease, as well as psychosocial abnormalities.
And refuted! Kios coming in saying, what about the dangers of sports themselves, like football? Many people sustain injuries like CTE from it that severely impact their lives, but it's an acceptable sport. People get hurt from any sport, but it's clearly wrong to ban all sports. But it doesn't look like he's stopping there, Rebecca. Coming out of left field, claiming, think of all the other things in the world that are associated with health risks that people take on for the greater benefit, like medicine. We would never get anywhere to further the body of knowledge and science if we didn't take health risks to push our limits. Only then can we know what works and how to make it safer. I completely get his point, Rebecca. People are willing to take health risks while taking medications just because the benefit outweighs the risk, even if in some rare cases it could lead to death. Just look at all the commercials on TV with the 2 minutes of straight listing the risks.
Can he take it further? It looks like he can. Keeping great control of the argument and not letting the anti-doping defense getting any statements in. Look like he's making another aggressive argument about safety. He says, you know what else is associated with major health risks that can and do lead to deaths? Smoking tobacco and drinking alcohol, both of which are perfectly legal for adults. If you're saying performance-enhancing drugs are morally wrong and should be outlawed because of their health risks, then you shouldn't make any exceptions. Along those lines, tobacco and alcohol are morally wrong and should be banned too. He says too much red meat and cholesterol has been linked to cardiovascular disease. Does anti-doping want to go ahead and ban those too? Wow, this is such an aggressive game.
Pro-doping is really taking it there today. Now they're giving the other side a little slack, but I have a feeling they're going to pull a spin move on them. They're setting up the point. Assume doping is intrinsically and unavoidably dangerous to those who dope. Okay, let's see where they take this. If it's unsafe, would this make it morally wrong in a way that's consistent with other practices in sports? Looks like they want to say no.
That's right, they're saying no. They say the typical practice of sports suggests safety is not of overriding importance. Professional sports are often dangerous without doping, such as racing and skiing. Safety is sometimes compromised for things like entertainment and intensity of the game.
That's right, practicing for the events are often dangerous too. When they're developing those higher level skills through dangerous training regimens, I often wonder how many times those motocross guys must crash doing those hanging air flips before they perfect them. Back to the field. Looks like they're bringing it home with the conclusion. To say doping is morally wrong because it's dangerous is a major inconsistency in the anti-doping argument.
Oh, look at this. Kios getting a little overconfident with this next power move. He's saying if safety was the foremost concern, we should limit our professional athletes to playing ping pong, shuffleboard, and chess. but not over vigorously in padded rooms. Boom, he went there.
The savagery, wow. How will the other side come back from this? Looks like they're taking this moment to get in a defense. They're saying it's not inconsistent because of extrinsic risks versus intrinsic risks. The dangers associated with the sport itself are intrinsic because you knowingly accept them if you want to play the sport at all. The risks associated with doping are extrinsic because they're not part of the sport itself. That seems like a valid argument to me, Rebecca. Let's see if pro-doping can refute that for the final point in the round.
And refuted! Pro-doping with the claim the intrinsic risks in sports aren't risks you must assume, because you can control that by choosing not to drive as fast, or not put yourself in that danger. Like not descending aggressively down a hill while cycling. Valid point to pro-doping. The crowd is going wild, Phoebe. Keogh's starting off so strong and has really pulled off some fully developed, well-thought-out arguments.
Despite that loss, anti-doping is moving the argument in a new direction, towards the offensive. Murray is taking the front line, saying this clearly moves them into a coercive aspect of doping. You can say that you can choose not to aggressively descend down a hill, but if all the riders around you are doing it, you lose your competitive edge if you decide to take it easy. It seems that to win the race, you must take these risks in order to have a shot at winning.
He's off to a good start here. Murray says if they succeed the claim that the danger of doping is not sufficient to make it morally impermissible, then they'll raise the argument that if one athlete chooses to do it, she effectively and practically forces other athletes who will compete against her to do so as well, thereby compelling them to accept a risk of injury or ill health that they would typically avoid. Since coercion is generally wrong, then it follows that the decision to dope is wrong.
I think this seems pretty valid, but let's turn to the refs. They're deliberating, and it looks like this isn't true coercion because in the decision to dope, there is usually no threat of harm and no intention to evoke any behavior from the other athletes directly affected by the decision. It's not like they're holding a gun to their heads and forcing them to dope.
Murray is heated. He's arguing with the refs. He's saying the decision to dope might not be directly physically threatening, but it is unconscionable. It imposes on others a choice that, morally speaking, they ought not to be required to make. It's not like mugging someone, but like blackmail or an indirect threat if they choose not to comply.
The refs aren't going to take this back talk, Rebecca. They're coming down hard with the call that it's not like blackmail at all, because in blackmail, something is threatening you if you don't comply. If you choose not to dope, the worst that can happen is you won't win. And that isn't even a given. It's totally plausible that you can beat someone on steroids by using your own skills.
I can definitely relate, Phoebe. It seems a little worrying saying dopers are forcing them to make a decision they wouldn't have otherwise chosen to make. We do this all the time in situations that are morally acceptable. If I choose the last room in a nice hotel that you are also looking at, you're forced to go with either the cheap motel or the insanely expensive resort, both of which you wouldn't have wanted otherwise. But I'd be doing no moral wrong by making this move.
Alright, well, it doesn't look like this foul is dampening the team's spirits. Pound is coming back with a new argument. Looks like they're setting up their classic move about protecting children. This should be good. Pound says one of the most pressing concerns about doping among adult athletes is the effect it may have on children. Since children tend to emulate adult athletes, if professionals are allowed to dope, then children will too.
And they're pulling a move out of Brown's playbook. Their study shows correlation between a Major League Baseball player, Mark McGwire, admitting to using performance-enhancing drugs before breaking the home run record in 1998, and children's knowledge of the drugs and intention to use them.
That's right. You can also see that the use of steroids and drugs are widespread among high school athletes, so it's not unlikely that children want to emulate their idols. Seems like pro-doping is coming up with a plan. Here they come. They say this isn't evidence where doping is morally wrong. It also presupposes that athletes have a moral responsibility for what children who idolize them do. It doesn't seem likely that everyone in the public sphere who children look up to, especially for entertainment, have a duty to act as a good role model. Related to doping, we conclude that it would be morally wrong for athletes to dope if it had a substantial negative effect on children that outweigh the benefits of them doping to themselves.
That's right. The risk of children doping could easily be mitigated by others who may influence children's actions. There are plenty of things that children aren't allowed to do that their idols might do, like drinking and driving. They have the means to if they really wanted, but it's mitigated by the fact that they have the better sense and education that it is a bad idea.
It technically seems like a valid point to the pro-doping side, but there's still something that doesn't sit well with me, Rebecca.
Yeah, I feel that too. Just still seems like there's something worrying about it.
This brings us to our last round of the day, concerning fairness. This is a big one, Rebecca. Let's see what happens.
The anti-doping side argues doping is wrong because it unfairly advantages those who do it. They worry about the technological and social disparities. Doping is unfair because it advantages those who dope over those who cannot dope, because they do not have the means or access to use performance-enhancing drugs. This is contrary to the purpose of sport, which should be the competition of skills acquired through practice and effort, not of who can afford the best drugs. Now, this seems pretty good to me, Phoebe, but I can see a couple places where pro-doping could poke some holes in their reasoning.
I was thinking the same thing. Pro-doping is really moving now, look at them. Keogh's bringing in the logic here. For it to be true for doping to be wrong on grounds of unfairness, these conditions must be true. 1, it must enhance performance. And I think he's going to grant that one to them.
I think he's going to grant that one to them too.
And 2, there must be genuine inequalities in athletes' access to performance-enhancing drugs. And 3, this difference in ability must be due to some other difference that is unfair.
The second premise is the one that's doubtful. He's going to attack that one. Yep, he grants that performance-enhancing drugs can give the potential competitive edge. I was right on that first premise. But he's saying the winning edge is not solely to the drugs. They do nothing towards the athlete's performance if it's not combined with their practice and training. Steroids won't automatically make you hit a home run every time you bat if you couldn't do it before. But in combination with vigorous training, maybe it'll help you build up the muscle mass to hit the ball further. It's not because it gave you the skill alone.
Also, they want to claim that it's wrong to say that doping is wrong because it's unfair. There are plenty of unfair aspects to sports, which are intrinsic to the very nature of sport. People are born with different abilities that make them disposed to be more or less athletic. This doesn't mean their disparities in genetics are morally wrong. If everyone was equal, there would be no point in competing.
If anything, doping can help the less inclined build up to the level of the more naturally gifted. We take this for granted. Think of some performance enhancers that are already accepted. We seem to forget about steroids like inhalers. They help people who naturally have asthma perform at the same level of those who were born with stronger lungs. They even the playing ground, and it is accepted as morally permissible.
That's so true, Rebecca. Seems like an overlooked point. Time is almost up in this debate, but as in most philosophical debates, the question is far from answered. Both sides brought up some great points today.
Who was your favorite?
I'd say the pro-doping, Rebecca. It seemed to me like they had the strongest arguments. They really had the evidence to back up their thoughts and prove their points thoroughly.
I'd agree with that, Phoebe, but I'd have to disagree and say anti-doping. There's something commonsensical about their arguments. Sure, we can't definitively prove that performance-enhancing drugs are impermissible on strictly moral grounds, but there's something telling me it's wrong to let everyone use drugs in sports that should be meant for natural competition.
Great performance by both sides. This has been the philosophical match on the topic of doping, and have a great rest of your day. This has been Phoebe and Rebecca commentating live. Tune in next week for the debate on amateurism.
Don't want to miss that one. Exploitation of college athletes has been a hot topic lately. Thanks and good night.